Hello. Is this thing on, as they say? Hi, I'm John Niven. I'm hoping somebody will let me know this is actually working because I'm terrified that it's not. Anyway, I'm here tonight to talk about my new novel, The Fuck It List. I suppose we can say that, can't we? We can swear here. Where's the camera? There we go. The Fuck It List. You can hopefully see the lovely quotes from Adam Kay. Uh, Adam Kay and Rankin. Oh, this is the international one. This might interest you actually. This is the international paperback, and this is the hardback. So the hardback has got Marina Hyde and Adam Kay and Marion Case. Lovely Marion Case. They're all lovely people, and this has Ian Rankin. I guess it's an international thing, kids. Oh, hello, hello, hello. Oh, people are coming. Good, 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 good. If you build it, if you film it, they will come. Um, they're quite difficult things these to do as a writer because it feels you just feel like a madman talking to yourself in the street. But we'll have to trust that some of you that you are actually get. Oh yeah, yeah, that is working. So I'm not talking to myself in the street. There are people and they're listening. So first I'll explain as I often do. Some of you may notice that this is an entire wall of my own books behind me. This is not as egotistical as it might seem at first glance. It's it's more practical than that. When sometimes when you're writing, well, for one thing, they send you all these things and you got to keep them somewhere. So you're not just going to throw them in the bin. But also, when you're writing a book and you're struggling, and it's a struggle every time, it's sometimes very helpful to be able to look around and realise that you've kind of somehow got this done. In my case, 10 times now. So it's helpful, not just a pure act of crazed hubris. So my novel we're here to talk about tonight, I'm going to do a short reading, and then hello from Yorkshire, hello from New Jersey, USA. That's quite a broad. That's quite a broad net we've cast there. Um, the novel, The Bucket List, is the adventures of a fellow called Frank Brill, who's 60 and has just been at the beginning of the book. In the very first scene, he's diagnosed as suffering from bowel cancer, which is going to kill him. And rather than having a bucket list of going swimming with dolphins and climbing the Andes or whatever, Frank has decided he's going to take revenge on the five or six people that have five people who have really crossed him in his life, and some of those are personal reasons and some are political. That we gradually learn the reasons are kind of personal and political combined. Um, the idea for the book, and this might interest people in terms of how novels get written, how they gestate, came from a friend of mine, Alan Crothers, in Scotland. Who we've known each other since we were 5 years old, since the first year of primary school. And Alan's one of these guys who is absolutely hilarious without realizing it. He thinks he's completely sane. He's actually a total maniac. And so he'll say insane things in a completely matter of fact way. And we're in the pub about maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and a friend of ours we're all kind of getting into our 40s at that point, and when a friend of ours had been diagnosed with cancer. And Alan said to all of us in the pub, well, you know what you do if you got that diagnosis, John? And we're going, what? Swim with the dolphins, go see the Himalayas. And he said, no, 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 no. You've got a list of five or six cunts that have really fucked you over, that have really crossed in your life. And you turn up at their door, like, ding dong, and you've got a fucking shotgun, and if you open the door, they know. As soon as they see you, they know why you're there. And you give them a couple of seconds to recognise you. Yeah! So we're all sat in the pub going, you go on a killing rampage with your cancer diagnosis. And he was like, of course, would you not do that? So I thought this was a hilarious idea. And it sort of lived somewhere in the back of my head for a while. And then in the past few years, I had become more interested in writing a novel set in a near future America, where Trump has been in office for, he did 2 terms, and now we're halfway through Ivanka's first term. So the book's set in 2026, and the backdrop to the novel is America after a decade of Trumpism and what that kind of looks like. When I started outlining the book nearly 3 years ago now, so quite early in Trump's first term. Uh, a lot of the things I was writing felt quite fanciful and out there, not least the very premise of Ivanka, of him doing 2 terms and Ivanka being president. And now, 3 years down the line, I'm starting to think I didn't go far enough. A lot of it's becoming chillingly plausible, I fear. So I thought I've already got some questions here. So I'll read you a short reading from early in the novel, and then we can jump in and answer some questions. So this is from quite early on in the book, and Frank's just come home from getting the cancer diagnosis, and he's watching TV. Okay. Huge crowds were packed into the bleachers, waving their flags, cheering in their red MAGA hats as they watched the soldiers and the hardware rumble past. Tanks, howitzers, assault vehicles, rocket launchers, thousands of troops, all lumbering away from the White House towards the Capitol. The lead tanks were huge M1 Abrams battle tanks, each weighing 60 short tons. Soldiers stood up through the open hatches, rigidly saluting the podium. You could faintly hear the cheers in the background, USA, 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 as the camera swung over the rows of spectators. And here it was, the real America, the people who'd travelled from Florida, from Nebraska, from Kentucky, and yes, from here, from Indiana, up to Washington, spending money they could ill afford to pay their respects on Veterans Day. They were cold and wet and mostly old and fat, and they were all wrapped in thin, cheap coats with their cardboard signs saying, God bless the Trumps, death to Democrats, and lock her up. The last one increasingly puzzling to Frank, as former Senator Clinton had died peacefully in her sleep 3 years ago. Perhaps they feared a ghost situation, a zombie Hillary, clawing her way out of the grave, trying to take their guns and delete more emails. There had been no tanks for the first few years of the parade. The road couldn't handle it. One of Trump's first acts early in his second term had been to order a multi-billion-dollar program to widen and strengthen Pennsylvania Avenue to accommodate the monsters every November. As Frank remembered this, as if on cue, the cameras cut to the presidential podium. President Trump and her husband, Greg, her second husband, Jared, the first, was still languishing on Rikers Island, having taken the fall for an awful lot of shit. Vice President Hannity and his wife were on her left, and on her right, still towering over the others even at 80, Donald. And his new wife, his fourth wife, Crystal, her belly swollen in the final trimester of her pregnancy. Thunder erupted suddenly as 3 of the fighter planes smashed through the sky above the parade. Trump put a protective hand on Ivanka's shoulder as he shouted into her ear over the jet roar, his finger jabbing into the sky. Ivanka wore a cream overcoat and fur hat. Her father his trademark black overcoat and red tie. Trump looked down at the vast cheering crowd and gave them his signature thumbs up. They went wild. It had been a masterstroke, you had to admit, firing Mike Pence halfway through his second term and nominating Ivanka as VP before resigning the office due to ill health. Ivanka automatically became president and had 18 months in the saddle before she had to fight an election. Obviously, one of her first acts in office had been to pardon her father of the multitude of charges he faced. Okay, so hopefully get a flavour of kind of where we are there. Some questions to do. Why did I decide to write this book? I think can I answer that before we get into this? What am I reading during lockdown from Lisa? I don't know if anyone else found this. I'm finding it very hard to concentrate on lockdown during lockdown. Some of it might be a side effect, I think, of the kids being around all the time, which is nice in its own way. And some of it, I find it hard to even work. So it's taking me much longer to do what I'd normally do in a couple of hours. Seems to take half the day at the moment. Just in terms of writing, I'm sort of quite close to finishing the next novel. but to read, I found myself doing a fair bit of rereading. I reread books a lot anyway. I've got probably like 20 novels that I reread on a regular basis every few years, or I'm sort of struggling through quite a lot of biography at the moment. Not struggling. I can only sort of focus on um, non-fiction. I'm finding it very difficult to read fiction at the moment. Then again, that's also not unusual for me when I'm finishing writing a novel, because I find it hard to get other novelists' voices in your head when you're trying to finish your own. So, oh God, what have I finished reading recently that I've really enjoyed? There was something. It should be lying on my desk. Oh God, I'm useless at that. I'll come back to that. Of course, I've got some books that I've read recently. He said convincingly. Do I try to be original or do I deliver what readers want? Um, if I knew what readers wanted, I certainly would deliver it. If I could do that, I'm afraid I'm not that clever. I'm kind of doomed to whatever I can sort of give. I guess I was a bit smarter. Maybe they've had a more uniform career, but novels I write, you're kind of victim to the ideas you have. And I've been fortunate in the sense that I've been doing this for 15 years now, and I've always known what the next novel is going to be. Um, while I'm while I'm writing the last one, I kind of know what the next book's roughly going to be. Um, but the downside to that is the kind of I don't really work in any specific genre. You know, some of the books have been almost thrillers, or in fact, one straight up thriller, and some have been like what you call broadly black comedy. Um, sometimes I think it'd be easier if I did work in one specific genre, but no, I'm not smart enough to second guess the public like that. My daughter once said to Leela once said to me, "Dad, why don't you write books like like Harry Potter?" And I thought, yeah, that isn't a bad idea. I'll knock one of them out. If only it were so easy, Leela. In fact, that's this. Sorry, and that question was from Kerry Kate. One from Jane. A lot of people are taking to writing during lockdown. What are the common pitfalls aspiring authors need to avoid? My God, how long have you got? Uh, I, 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 I think. Well, this isn't just a problem of people who are trying to write. This is a problem that established writers face too. Um, my friend the novelist Andrew Hagen had a great expression. He once said that he had begun many a short story in a Chardonnay rush, which was on closer inspection was later abandoned. So starting, I think, is easy for most of us. Finishing is hard, and if you are I was told many years ago about the pyramid. At the very top of the pyramid, you've maybe got Stephen King and J.K. Rowling, and then there's a bunch of the rest of us who kind of make a living, and then you go further down, there's people that maybe don't make a living, and then there's a huge section which is kind of people who have written something but haven't managed to get it published. And below that, there's a much bigger section of people who've started something and never finished it. Below that, there's probably an even bigger section of people who've thought about writing a book or wanted to write a book and have never even tried it. But if you can just get out of that huge section of the pyramid of people who have started something and not finished it and move up into the I finished something, that's a big jump. Because what you learn as you write more books is that you have to have a huge, I do anyway, you have to have a huge appetite for rewriting. My first drafts are really poor. I have to. Um, the most fun part of the process for me is writing the first draft because you're just winging it. You get to make stuff up every day, and it's a constant voyage of discovery, and there's a lot of joy and excitement in that process. And then you have to put it in a drawer for a couple of months, and then dig it out and read it with fresh eyes. And that to me is the worst part of the whole process, because all you see is the mistakes, and it's awful. I often compare it to being forced to watch video footage of yourself masturbating. It's just excruciating. But somehow you get through reading that first draft and it's pretty bad. And then the really hard work, the second draft for me is always really hard work because there's whole lots of it that won't work and parts that do aren't refined enough, and you have to work through it and refine all that. And then the third draft gets more fun again. That becomes a case of you're sort of polishing at that point and honing. That's kind of fun. I also write screenplays, and in the filmmaking process, the worst part is always when you're showing the first cut of the movie. The director's first cut will always be 3 hours, 2 hours, 40 minutes long, and it will be really painful to watch. And then as you edit and you refine, it gets better, and hopefully it gets better and better. And that final stretch of the editing process where you're really honing it and polishing it in both movies and novels is a lot of fun. But in a long-winded way, to come back to answering the question, I'd say my advice, if you're thinking of using your lockdown time to finally begin that novel or that screenplay, good luck to you. Just don't get it right, and as I say, get it written, get it finished. The other great piece of writing advice, I can't remember who told me this, was if you're stuck, have your characters do something, and then you'll have something to change. And very often, good ideas come out of that process of just having them do something. Okay, Becky, on this, this is from, sorry, it was from Jane. This is from Becky. Critics and publishers attempt to pigeonhole authors and their works into conventional, convenient genres. As a writer, what is your opinion on the generic classification of novels? Well, I touched on this a minute ago. That I don't really work. I'm a bit neither fish nor fowl. I don't write genre novels as such, but I wouldn't be regarded as a literary novelist. So I kind of fall between two stools. I mean, I also write criticism and reviews, and I understand why genres are necessary, but it can be difficult if you fall without them. I've often thought life might have been a lot easier if I had thought I'm going to be a horror writer or I'm going to be a crime writer. Not to say that lightly and disparage those genres, because some of my favourite writers work within those genres. But I think it's an easier sell sometimes for publishers and bookstores if you do this specific thing. In fact, I'll tell you an interesting story, which I'm off the. You've heard it here first. I wrote one book that was a straight ahead thriller compared to anything else I've written, which was called Cold Hands. And when you're a writer, you get PLR statements, public lending, right? You get, like, I don't know, sixpence every time somebody borrows your book from a public library. And you can see it's broken down as to which book earns you what. And Cold Hands, the thriller I had written, earned me more than all the other novels put together. And I think I said to somebody at my publisher, why is that? How did... And they said, well, it's a thriller, and in the libraries, it'll be in the thriller section, and there's people who just like thrillers, so they'll just go and see that it's a thriller that they haven't read yet, so they'll just take it, and that doesn't really happen in the non-genre world. So there are sort of commercial reasons, I think, maybe I should go, I think a time machine, go back 50 years ago, and I'll start again and just go the straight genre way. But I like doing what I do because, you have ideas for different books and they suggest different genres to them. Like when the idea for Cold Hands, that book came about when I thought about the idea of a Jamie Bulger type, one of the kids who killed Jamie Bulger, who gets completely new identity and moves to a new country and grows up, and then somehow, many years later, when he's an adult, is tracked down by the mother of the boy he killed. And the idea kind of was, what's the half-life in that? What's the half-life when that kind of hatred and rage, if you catch up with that person 30, 40 years ago, what might you do? So once I knew that, it became clear that book wasn't going to be a lol fest. So that kind of, it's similar to the new one. Originally, the Fuck It List, I had conceived it being a bit more broadly comic, being funnier. But once I realised Frank was actually going to kill 5 people, you have to kind of come at that not only with a certain decorum, but you have to, the audience, to want to be with them for the whole ride of the book, you got to really by why he wants to kill these people, which involved giving Frank quite a tragic backstory without giving away any spoilers. So sometimes those sorts of considerations end up determining the genre the book winds up in. Uh, to date, over your writing career, you've worked with a variety of people such as Caitlin Moran and Nick Ball. What is your key to cooperating with other writers to produce successful outcomes? Um, it's really fun for me to work with other writers because it's quite a long, lonely business writing a novel. You're alone in a room for the best part of 2 years, whereas working in films, you get to go and meet other people and you go to the, it's a laugh. And it's different with every writer I've worked with. It's different. It's always funny when you start and you're sort of feeling each other, sizing each other up. I remember with Nick and I type mainly. We'll both pace around the room and throw ideas out, and I'll do the typing. And when Kat and I first started writing together, this was before How to Build a Girl, I think, and another thing we wrote. Kat's a typer, and it was clear we were both just dying to be at the keyboard. So I think we wound up saying we'd decide which sort of 6 scenes we are going to work on next, and she'd take 3 and I'd take 3, and we'd write 3 each and then see how they sat together. And that was very different than how Nick and I worked for 10 years at that point. But it was a lot of fun. And I'm doing another project now. I'm co-writing a sitcom for AMC in America with Neil Forsyth, who wrote The Brilliant Guilt with Mark Bonner, which I don't know if many of you saw, was on BBC Scotland recently, which is a brilliant series. And Neil and I are writing this sort of comedy together. And because of lockdown and we live very far apart, we've just batted the drafts back and forth between us. We got together, we met at a hotel for a day, sort of equidistant from our houses, and basically outlined the story, and then he wrote a draft, I wrote a draft, and we threw it back and forth. So it's different, I think, with everyone, depending on circumstances, geography, schedules, But it's always fun to work with other people for me. Oh, I imagine it's difficult for them because I'm a nightmare who insists on getting his own way. Was there a catalyst for you leaving the music industry and taking up a full-time career as a novelist? Was there a catalyst? There wasn't a eureka moment. It was more gradual than that. I was in the music industry for roughly 10 years, from about 1991 to about 2002. And the first sort of 5 years of it, up until the sort of late 90s, were really, good fun. And then as I turned 30 and get into my 30s, it got a bit more repetitive and the hangovers got worse. And once you got to 2001, the industry was starting to feel the bite of the internet. And the problem also was I was getting into my mid-30s by that point, and I'd always wanted to be a novelist. I'd always wanted to try and do that. I tried to write a novel maybe half a dozen times from my late teens throughout my 20s, and I had a lot of the same ideas and the same way of the same turn of phrase almost back then, but I didn't have the self-discipline to shut the door for a long stretch of time every day, and get on with it. I didn't have that kind of discipline until I was an older guy. So I think I was 30, Music from Big Pink, my first novel, I think it was 34, 35 when I wrote that. And it became for me, the idea, for years I thought, oh, if I try to become a writer, I'm probably doomed to fail. And then in the end, it got to a point where the failing couldn't be worse than the not trying. I felt I had to give it a go. So it was quite scary, and I had quite a cushy job. I've never really it's terrible to say it. I've never really had a job. I kind of fallen out of university and wound up in the music business, getting vastly overpaid for doing incredibly little. So it was a relief that it worked, because I didn't really have a skill set of any marketable kind to fall back on. That was Jill. Well, what am I most looking forward to in lockdown? Well, this sounds terrible, but the lockdown hasn't made a huge difference to my daily routine. I sort of come in this room that you can see me in here, and I sit and write, and that's about that. I miss going to restaurants, obviously, and I miss seeing friends. I'm being slightly facetious here, but we have quite a nice garden. You can see the garden is too dark. We get quite a nice garden, so we have it fairly cooked. And Charlotte works from home. I work from home, so it's kind of not been the huge change that I think a lot of people have probably had to suffer. But what am I most looking forward to? Um, I'm really going to have to address the subject of losing some weight because I think, like many people, I've eaten like a madman. So yeah, we'll have to try and get the pounds off. Tracy Dunbar, hi from Oestray, hello. Nancy Bletch Locatelli, hello from France. Sarah Waters, Matt Walt, hello. Rebecca Curry, that's a fine surname, Rebecca. One of the first girls I ever dated had the surname of Curry. Uh, God, I love Frank. He's ace. I'm glad you like Frank. He's yeah. He's got some issues though. We have to say. Hello from Book Bugs and Dragon Tales Bookshop in Norwich. Norwich, fine, found town. You got that old football team. You got Delia Smith. Is that the Norwich one? Football. I'm weak on football, but I think that's Norwich, isn't it? Winning the 11th man. All that malarkey. Hello from Falkirk. Fine part of the world. Please order from Lingham's Bookstore. Yes, I should mention this. Yeah, if you're watching tonight, you can order the book from Lingham's Books, Booker Books, Bookish, and Forum Book, or your local indie. So there you go. Do it, do it, do it. Buy my wares. I'm Malcolm McMaster. I'm scaring Malcolm because he can imagine something like this happening. We love your insults. How do you think them up? I don't know if you're talking about the insults in my book or the insults that seem to be required hourly on Twitter at the moment. I don't know. I guess I've just got a facility for it. Mind you, there's plenty of material. If you spend much time in Twitter, certainly if you spend much time arguing with the Trump MAGA lunatics, the insults are fairly needed there. I've got to cut that out. I've got to cut that back to maybe 5 or 6 hours away. 5 or 6 hours a day. Speaking of the devil, Cat, we're just talking about you. You missed it. If I had 24 hours in a virus-free world, what would I do? That is a good question. I think you know the answer to this, babe. I would hair it into W1 and spend the day trawling the members clubs and bars of Greek Street, Dean Street, Frith Street, and then dinner somewhere very nice, and yeah, maybe a nice hotel for the night. That would probably be it. I should really say I'd head it up to Scotland and see my poor old mum who's doing lockdown all on her own up there. But sadly, the cuisine choices in Irvine aren't making that jump up massively. But thank you for the question, Catmo. Well, treated it does. Another order going in. Thank you, guys. Russell Brownjohn. Hello, Russell. What can't I get? What eases writer's block for me? What do you do? Well, again, I've never really had writer's block. Because I've always kind of known what the next book's going to be. So I've always had something to work on. I've never that thing again to the office, to the desk one day and thinking, okay, what am I going to be doing today? I've always kind of known. So obviously some days it's easier than others. But one of the best bits of advice I ever got on that kind of thing is if you're struggling taking the thread of the book forward, the narrative forward, attack the book from an angle it isn't expecting it. So, start a new subplot or introduce a new character. It's like Chandler's old have someone come through the door holding a gun, or a chapter that you might need later on, work on that, and you can always plug it in or go back and expand a bit you wrote earlier. There's always something to do. my novel explores Carrie Morris. Your novel explores anger brought about by the broken society we live in. Did I feel purged after writing it? I don't know that I get catharsis from writing that. Simply that you're great. I've got all that out now. I mean, there were things I certainly kind of worried to see in this book about where, especially America's headed at the moment. But I didn't finish writing and think, well, I feel so much better. I've got that off my chest. Um, it's anger. I think I'm sort of past anger when it comes to the American more. It's more just actual bewilderment. Um, you watch it on a daily basis, and it's disbelief. I mean, especially this week, we're kind of what we're seeing going on with the Bill Barr thing and overturning Mike Flynn's character. So I won't bore on about this because anyone who knows me, I can bore on for hours about this stuff. But it's kind of, I think, unless that fucking orange sex offender nightmare is either dies, which please let him get the virus and die. Or it's out of office by November. I think we're in for a very dark time. And here we are on Facebook, that motherfucking low-life cocksucker Mark Zuckerberg censoring Lincoln Project ads and allowing Trump's utter bullshit to go unfiltered. I mean, you fuck Zuckerberg. So we're in very dangerous times. So let's hope he dies and/or loses within the next 6 months. Which character would I most like to hang out with? Obviously, Stelfox. No, I'm being flippant. Yeah. I think Ethel from Sunshine Cruise might be a lot of fun. Robin Black. Hello from Irvine. I recognise the town in a lot of your books. Do you find it easy to write about places you're familiar with? Actually, Irvine has only been in 2 of them, I think. And only in the Amateurs, it's obviously a fictional town called Ardgirvan, which is based in Irvine, where I come from. And then in No Good Deed, which was the novel before this one, the final scene of the book is set in that town, but it's the only time we go there, I think. So somebody might correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's any other big sequences set in the Ardgirvan or Irvine. Yeah, no, I find it actually harder to write about that. It's easier for me when it's a completely removed fictional scenario than the place I come from, which I guess why I came up with the Ardgirvan thing, so I could take sort of license. Also, when you're writing about a real place, you have to be there's a sort of fidelity to reality because I'm so bad at research, I'd rather just make it up. Then you don't get 500 letters saying, I think you'll find if you go east on that street, then you know, that shit. Grant Barrett, how many drafts did I write of Kill Your Friends before passing it to my agent? And did the main storyline change much between the first two? I think I wrote about 9 drafts of Kill Your Friend before my agent Claire Conville read it. And Claire's a wonderful editor. And then I think I did another 5 or 6 drafts with Claire's notes before we went looking for a publisher. So easily 15 drafts on that book before it sort of did the rounds. And then, of course, we got turned down by, I think, 17 publishers. And it was right at the last bit. It was right when I was sort of Googling teaching jobs in Inverness that we got an offer from Random House, and it was all good, kids. But yeah, it was a scary time. But I mean that's the first book, and you're trying to get a deal. It's did it change much? Oh, hang on. Through on the power cable. It was more a case of Claire's notes were a lot of just sort of pushing certain storylines further. You know, one of the ones that famously she didn't have the idea, but she made me push it further. Was some of you have read the novel might remember the drum and bass superstar Rage from the novel, which was may have been based on my interactions with 90s drum and bass legend Goldie, and that storyline just kind of petered out a little bit. And Claire said, "I think you have to take it further, and we need to see what happens to that guy, and at least have a conclusion." Yes, Claire was one of the very few people who read Kill Your Friends and said, "I think you can push this further." And so that's how it wound up with the whole storyline that he gets into a fight in a nightclub and gets brain damaged and sort of reinvents, well, Stealth Fox and his team reinvent him as a sort of drum and bass Stephen Hawking, if you will. And after the book came out, I got a phone call from Goldie, who I hadn't spoken to for years. We worked together at London. I was his product manager at London Records, and we hadn't spoken for years, since the 90s, I don't think. And I'd heard, I still occasionally would speak to Pete Tong, who'd read the book and loved it, and Pete and I worked together at London Records too. And so Pete said to me, "Oh, Goldie's read it," and that gave me a number. I think he might call you. So I thought, that's fine. Under no circumstances will I ever take the call. And I was sitting in the house with Helen at the time, and the phone rings. It's a Hemel Hempstead number, and I kind of know that Goldie lives in that area. I'm like, fuck, that's Goldie. So I'll just blank it. So I sort of just left it. So it rang off, then immediately started ringing again. Let it go. Immediately started ringing again. I put it under a cushion at this point, and she went, "He's a maniac. He's not going to stop. He'll literally keep calling back. He'll keep coming. He'll keep coming. Like the Terminator, he'll come in there and rip your fucking heart out." So I finally thought, oh, fuck, I'm going to have to answer this. So I answered the phone, and I was like, "All right, John, it's Jay." And he was such a sweetheart. He was so lovely about the book, and such a good sport about, his treatment. And I think he'd done that thing like a lot of sort of furious cocaine addicts. He completely turned his life around. He was into yoga and hazelnuts and meditation and all that kind of shit now. So I think he sort of had this perspective where he sort of realised that was somebody he used to be, and he was able to laugh about it and recognise that. But the final words he said to me in the phone call, which he went, it was like Columbo moment. I nearly had the phone down, and he went, Joe, just one last thing, mate." And he said, "Did I have to end up in a fucking wheelchair?" I should have blamed Claire, but I just said, "Yeah, you did." But bless him, he was absolutely lovely about it. Did I visit the golf course in Florida where Frank went? There's a spoiler here, so I won't tell you. It's kind of impossible to visit that course unless you know a member. The course we're talking about is Trump International in Florida. So no, I didn't. So it was a lot of, I got scorecards and course guides, and Google Maps is always your friend. So that I got a good idea of the layout. And if you're a golfer, you look at these things, you kind of know how it might play, Hello from Rochester, Minnesota, home of the Mayo Clinic. It certainly is. It certainly is. You guys, it's where all the sort of penis surgery and whatnot, allegedly. So I'm told. Have I got a plan for the next one, Jane Peterson? Can I give a steer about what it's going to be? Well, I do actually. I've almost finished the next one. God bless the lockdown there. It's kind of, I'm going to sound so boring here. The next one is about, it's all set in one location, and it's kind of a comedy horror thing. John Carpenter's The Thing meets Kevin Smith's Clerks, if you will, and it's set on the night of the US election in 2016, and it all takes place over one night, a 24-hour period. And it it's, as I say, it's kind of fairly outrageous and extreme, comedically horrifically comedic, and in my mind it forms with Kill 'Em All, which of course was the return of Stephen Stilfox from Kill Your Friends in 2018, against the backdrop of Trump's inauguration, his first year in power. And now with Kill 'Em All, this book is going to form a rough kind of Trump trilogy, if you will. And then I really, really, really hope that we're all done with the subject, and we can move on. But yeah, I'm quite excited about that. We're kind of agonisingly close to finishing, and all being well, that I guess would be published the end of next year, sort of late 2021, or maybe next summer. Then after that, I'm planning to write a memoir, and then after that, in 2023, hopefully it's the return of Kennedy Marr in the sequel to Straight White Male, 10 years on from the last time we met Kennedy. So someone finished Fuck It List last night. Brian Patrick Crawford, a little too close, title close to me, as I said that phrase to my 75-year-old mother-in-law a good while ago. I'm joking about going to killing spree at a Tory gathering. Oh, thank you. Good to know, dude. British guilt. It certainly was Tracy Dunbar. Sue Porter, show the garden. It's just getting a bit dark now. I think. I don't know. Can you see much of that? Can I do this? Tons of shit lying out there. You probably can't see it really. Anyway, you get the idea. It goes round the side and shit. Delighted to sell my wares. Thank you for selling my wares. Forum Books. Gavin Simpson. Sorry, so many questions here. I'm trying to get. I'm trying to get to everyone. Have I ever written songs or poems? Obviously, I dabbled in poetry in my youth, and it's funny because once you become a novelist, you find yourself at the odd literary dinner party next to a poet, and I always think, Jesus, it's brass balls to be a poet in this day and age. To think, I'm going to write poetry. I mean, being a novelist feels like Augustus Windsock sometimes these days. It feels so hopelessly recherche and, somewhere between a spinning jenny manufacturer and a penny farthing dealership. So to write poetry, I think it's real brass ball stuff. I often, to give an idea of this, I posted on Twitter the other night about kind of jokingly saying I might get into video games. I'm not kidding you, within hours I had 400 replies of people recommending video games, 400 interactions. You post about your novel and it's like maybe 2 people going, sounds all right. Video games, that's what it should be. Why am I fucking wasting my life cranking out fucking novels no fucker reads? I should be writing video games. So, anybody out there fancies collaborating on a solid video game, hit me up, dudes. Just to clarify, it's not this idea. Yep, Malcolm McMaster. It also scares me, the idea of Trump getting another 4 years and sneaking a bank in. Russell, dude. I hope you're well, mate. Hope you're cutting that red meat down. You're pounding a lot of steak when I was checking you out on Twitter or Instagram, maybe. Thank you, Mr. I love you too. Thank you, Pierre Watson. Stunning work. That's very kind of you, Pierre. Grant Barrett again. How did I transition from writing novels to screenplays? I actually wrote 3 screenplays before I wrote a novel. So this bloody thing. It's because I wait to look at the garden. And I guess it was I did screenplays before a novel. It was kind of out of humility more. You're going to write a novel. You think you're going to be treading the same boards as James Joyce and God knows what else. A lot of venerable names. With the screenplay, I thought, well, I can go up against the guys who wrote 6 Lives of the Potato Men. I can take them on. But of course, what you learn quickly is the actual screenplays. Actually, I think harder in many ways than the novel. You kind of have to know where you're going a lot more. It'll fall apart on you. Whereas with a novel, you can kind of wing it a little bit. But I had written 3 scripts before I tried the novel, and I think it gives you a certain an appreciation of structure and the kind of thing of maybe if I have a sort of page turning quality to my books, it's that thing of coming into your scenes as late as possible and getting out of them as quickly as you can once you've done the work that you're there to do. So that was helpful, and I like writing both. They're very different disciplines. At the moment, I'm in the sort of situation where I've got 2 or 3 screenplays on the go and also a new novel. So sometimes I'm not mentally agile enough to easily jump between projects, what I'm kind of having to at the moment. So anyway, that keeps you young. If I could read one secret diary, read The Secret Diary of Michael Jackson, The Secret Diary of Tiger Woods, or The Secret Diary of Donald Trump. But if I read Trump having no inner life, his secret diary would be blank. It's a collection of blank pages. Tiger Woods would be fun, but I think you'd have to go Jacko, wouldn't you? Secret Diary of Michael Jackson. I mean, come on, that's got to. Well, I'm hesitant to say that's got to be a winner. It would be a nightmarish disgrace, but worth the read. I kind of wrote The Secret Diary of Michael Jackson. It was called Kill 'Em All, available from William Heinemann, all good bookstores like Forum Books, and published in 2018. Is there ever a circumstance I might consider joining a conga? I am the least conga person you can possibly imagine. Hello, John Petrie. Have I written a story from a female perspective? I wrote a story from several female perspectives. The Sunshine Cruise Company, which is a novel about a group of retired women who rob a bank, which was before the whole Hatton Gardens thing went down. I think that was 2014 or 15 that novel came out. So if you're interested in me writing from the female perspective, Carol Dearden, I direct you to the Sunshine Cruise Company. Garden looks lovely. Thank you, Tracy Dunbar. You would notice if it was a better picture, the grass needs cutting. We have furloughed the gardener. So I'm going to have to actually cut the faking stuff myself, which I did a few weeks ago and made a huge hoo-ha about it on social media. Because I keep it real. I mow that grass myself sometimes. It's unbelievable. He does it all. Um, Kennedy Ma when his mum dies. Oh, thank you. That's very kind, Jane Peterson. Yeah, Kennedy, his poor old mum dying. Funnily enough, I was just writing a version of that scene the other day. Straight White Male has been optioned for a TV show by the good people at Yellow Bird, who also did The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest, all that stuff. And I'm writing the pilot at the minute. So that scene is currently making the cut. It's interesting writing for TV at the moment. I mean, it's very much where the kind of when you've got a sort of mini series of 6 or 10 parts, you could pretty much take your entire novel, and even that's not enough to fill it. You can go into every subplot in the novel, and you can even maybe bring in stuff that you edited back. Whereas before that world, the Netflix and the sort of the box set adventure existed, when you were adapting for a movie, you're always in a situation where you'd have to take a sort of 300 and 400 page novel and fit it into a 120-page script. There's a lot of stuff has to go, and that's kind of changed now. If you're writing for, streaming platforms, where even all the content you've got in the book is sometimes not enough. You need to bring more to the table. So it's kind of it's fun doing that at the moment. Straight White Male and No Good Deed, I should say, have both been optioned by different companies for TV. The downside to that is it's always a long, old, fairly painful process. We had a situation. I wouldn't name names. That's a bit unprofessional. But with a major broadcaster a few years ago with the amateurs, where it was optioned and they wanted to do it, and I wrote the pilot and everybody loved it, and this obviously took months, and it went on and on and on. It went right up to the final green light to go to make the pilot had to come from the head of the channel, who, as some of you may know who've read my novel The Amateurs, it's kind of about golf and gangsters and contract killing and drug dealing in small town Scotland, and it's the novel that was published after Kill Your Friends, and when I pitched it initially to Random House, or into the sort of making, they say, "Oh, what Kill Your Friends going to hit? What are you going to do next?" And I said, "Well, I've got this novel about golf," and I got that far, and I could see everything. I'm going, Jesus Christ, and so I retold it. Well, it's kind of about gangsters and murder and infidelity and drug dealing and golf, and everybody was much more comfortable with that description. So anyway, the TV show was written and it was all great and everybody loved it, and we had some great acting talent who are fans of the book. Guy like Martin Compston, from Line of Duty, and Greg McHugh from Fresh Meat, some brilliant comic actors, Greg Hemphill, some great comic actors who were kind of interested in being in it. And then the head of the channel read it and went, "What the golf? Golf's not funny. Just kill this." And that was it. It was the sort of 18 months of work and prospect was just down the shitter immediately. And so yeah, and that's not yet been reactivated. But I thought The Amateurs would make a great TV show. But what do I know? I'm not the hard-working head of a major network. The blocked toilet scene in No Good had me howling. Yeah, that's your classic disgraceful set piece. I can only apologise for the hellish contents of that. Eating, yes, I can relate. John Petrie again. Yeah, we gotta eat. I've got to stop eating. How's the sorry, Brian? Patrick Crawford also asked, how's the diet going? What beverage are you on tonight? Brian, sadly, this was Diet Coke, which I've gunned now. This is shocking. I haven't had a drink now for 4 weeks because we did I was in LA in January with the family and obviously overeating and over drinking like a maniac. And then we came back and we went straight to Scotland for half term, which was like all the family around. And that was another week of big meals and drinking every day. And then we came back and it was seemed to be pretty soon after we're into lockdown. And the first, is it 7 weeks in lockdown now? The first 3 weeks of lockdown was literally sort of martinis or whiskey sours, then wine and massive every single night. And after 3 weeks of that, by sort of the first week of April, I said, Charlotte, we have literally been on it every night since the middle of January. So what's that, 2.5 months? And I just start to feel really run down. So this is a long, tedious preamble to say that, yeah, 4 weeks ago we sort of said, right, enough's enough, and I've been on the wagon for 4 weeks. So and all the cliches are true. Sleeping great. I'm up at 6:30 in the morning, getting lots of getting as much work done as my lockdown mind can cope with. That's all good, but it's just you're shit. Let's face it, it's shit house boring in the evening. Although I was about to say I'm less likely to say something insanely controversial on something like this, but I think I call Mark Zuckerberg a cocksucker, so that's probably qualifies as slightly controversial. But yeah, it's good, but it's boring. That could be the catchphrase for the whole recovery program, Alcoholics Recovery in the world. It's good, but it's boring. And it's not going to be forever. I'm figuring we'll do 3 months maybe till we get some pork, some beef off. I find it easier not to overeat when I'm not hungover. You're hangover or you're drunk, indeed. You're pissed and just like fuck it, we'll eat everything. I find it easier to stay on top and not eating like 5 pizzas when I'm kind of not hungover half the time. Oh, someone here saying that they've bought a Carew by Steve. Sorry, Brian again. Bought Carew after I recommended it. If you haven't read that novel, it's Carew by Steve Teish. It's a fantastic novel. It's Karoo. It's one of those kind of unknown gems that everybody you recommend it to comes back and loves it. I heartily recommend that book. Dusty Miller. Now that's quite a handle, Dusty Miller. Dusty Miller, that's the country singer or porn star with that kind of handle, dude. I think we've done most of these. A couple more. I think we're nearly there. I think I've done you all, lovely people of book chat, and I see we have like 6-7 minutes to go, so that's not bad. Shall I just vamp? Shall I vamp for 6 minutes? What do you vamp on? Right, come on, somebody. Ask me another question. I'm going to bugger off. Ask me anything. I'll answer anything at this point. Or I'll just start making shit up. Let's see. I'm scared. Maybe I should refresh it. Should I refresh it? Maybe there is more stuff lurking. Mind you, I'm here to blow it up. I'm such a Luddite. Usually when you do these things, the people call you before them and step by step. But they were lovely, the people who were organising this, but they were just a bit kind of, we'll see you then. And I had to do the Penguin Books podcast the other day, which is quite a sort of proper, serious one. And they send you, they bike you all the shit for it. I don't have any of this. But you got all these great big sort of King Dong sort of microphone jobs. You have to plug it all in and get it all working. And thankfully that technician guy did phone half an hour before it, and I said to him at the outset, look, mate, I am a nightmare. I generate some sort of magnetic force field that destroys all technology, laptops, phones, tablet, anything that I have to interact with in that level will be destroyed. And he was a bit like, nah, bollocks, it'll be fine. And then 20 minutes later, he was going, this can't be happening. This has never happened before. What the hell's this? So sure enough, it was a tech nightmare, but we got there in the end. The Gavin Simpson, the biggest bar tab I've ever picked up. Oh, there's a few. I mean, there's back in the London Records days. There was, some. I think we once spent. I think I ran up a £3,000 bar tab in the Groucho, celebrating the release of an album by a techno act, and the album sold something like 200 copies. And I, as the head of A&R said to me later, you basically drank the entire turnover of the record on the night it was released. I mean, that was back when £3,000 was it. That was like 1995. £3,000 was a big bar tab then, let me tell you. In recent years, I know, Kat, you were at whoever was on this who was at the launch party for Kill 'Em All. I think that reached a point quite late in the night where the publishers, the bar tab ran out, and with sicking inevitability, I tossed my own credit card into the pile for a couple more hours. That ended up being fairly spicy, old Bill. But we only go around once, kids. So somewhere in the £3,000 region is probably just on drinks. If we're going to bring food into it, then this shit's going to really get dark. But no. Who's going to be playing Kennedy Marr in the TV adaptation? There is somebody in mind who we're kind of doing the dance that you do with people. I can't actually say, but it would be fantastic if this fellow committed. Jan Peterson with the disrespectful. How much bugle have you ever heard? You wouldn't ask John Updike that, would you? Well, he's dead. He definitely wouldn't ask. But would you ask Ian Rankin that? I'd probably ask Ian that. His reply would be none. Yeah, but not so much these days. I don't really have the constitution for it, Jane Peterson. The bounce back time's too long. My reputation, such as it is, with my reputation as a bon viveur, is I found that when I started trying to become a writer, that I couldn't do it with a hangover. That thing of having to sort of dream up a world into existence from nowhere was too difficult to do with a hangover. The level of self-confidence you need, I just couldn't muster that up when I was sort of poleaxed with the hangover. So once I started writing, I really dialed a lot of that stuff back. Not that when I'm sort of between books and having some downtime, I'm not still capable of having some fun. We can have some fun, but nothing like the old days. Russell, have any of the novel options involved other people doing the adapting? How do you feel about some of the things? Well, that's a very good question, Russell. It's a difficult one because live by the sword, die by the sword, and all that. I make a fairly good living rewriting other people, so I can't really get too snitty about it occasionally happening to me. It's only happened twice actually. Music from Big Pink, the screenplay for that, very brilliant screenplay, was written by Jez Butterworth, the playwright who did Jerusalem, and Jez is also a very successful screenwriter in LA, and he wrote a very good script because it was a long time ago, over 10 years ago, which has just never got made. I think it's a very expensive movie because if you've read the novella Music from Big Pink, it spans the 60s, the 70s, and into the 80s. So as soon as you have sort of big sort of story like that, go over 3 decades, they're expensive movies. And it nearly came together once, twice. I think Robert Pattinson was nearly attached to play one of the. At one point, they cast and gone that I think Robert Pattinson was going to play Richard Manuel from the band, and Jack White. They were talking about getting to play Garth Hudson or Leave. I can't quite remember. But it was kind of looking like it might happen, then it didn't. It was just often the way with these things. But Jay's script, it was brilliant. It wasn't what I'd have done, but it was. That's kind of why you hire people sometimes. It was very good. And one other experience, which I won't go into, on another novel, which I wrote the script for, and then they took it away and got someone else to do it, and that really wasn't good. So yeah, but it's still a kind of live issue, so I won't comment. He said enigmatically. So I see that we sort of get 20 seconds or so left. So thank you very much, folks, for listening. It's all tricky to do these things. You feel, as I say, like you're shouting to yourself in the phone box. I'm in a glass cage of emotion, etc. But it's been lovely to be here, and I hope you enjoy the new novel, Flashback, The Fucket List, by me, John Niven. Thank you very much. Bye bye.